So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Tamar Jacoby. I'm president of Opportunity America. We're a research and policy shop in Washington, D.C., focused on expanding opportunity with a heavy emphasis on skills and job-focused education and training. And I'm just going to take 60 seconds to set the stage, and then we'll get to it. The topic of the day is Earn and Learn Job Training, what you might know better as apprenticeship. My colleague Ron Haskins from the Brookings Institution and I have looked at the job outcomes from one particular Earn and Learn training program and found some amazing results, and we want to share them with you today. And by the way, you might also want to check out, there's a write-up of our results in the Wall Street Journal this morning. But we want to go beyond that in the conversation today. We also want to take a broader look at the Earn and Learn or apprenticeship model. How does it work? Why does it work as well as it does? What are the challenges? And also, how do we scale it? And this was important before the pandemic struck. It's all the more important today with millions of Americans out of work. And it's going to remain important when the pandemic is long behind us, because what we used to call the future of work, is going to create persistent skills gaps and retraining needs for many years to come. And Earn and Learn training will remain a key tool in addressing those needs. So with that, I'll introduce our first speaker, GARDNER, who will tell us a little more about the program Ron and I looked at, the Federation for Advanced Manufacturing Education, widely known as FAME. GARDNER, Vice President of Strategic Initiatives for the Manufacturing Institute. That's the nonprofit arm of the National Association of Manufacturers. GARDNER, the floor is yours. Tell us a little about the FAME program.
So thank you, Tamar. It's a pleasure to be here. And thank you to Opportunity America for taking the time to study this program. We definitely appreciate it. So again, my name is GARDNER CARRICK. My personal safety commitment is to always confirm local safety procedures before entering a manufacturing facility. And one of the things you'll learn about the FAME program is that every participant in FAME has to develop their own personal safety commitment. It's part of developing an overall safety culture within the program. So first and foremost, FAME was founded in 2010 by Toyota at their facility in Georgetown, Kentucky. And it quickly grew over the next 10 years to encompass 13 states and 25 chapters and over 400 companies. We'll get to more of that data when Tamar and Ron go through their information. But about a year ago, Toyota recognized that in order to continue this growth, they needed to transition the program to an organization whose mission really focused on workforce development. So they selected the Manufacturing Institute and gave us stewardship of the program, and we are honored and proud to manage this and to scale it as much as possible. So it is definitely the crown jewel in our workforce activities. So let's take a look at what exactly FAME is. So if you take a couple steps back and just look at the program overall, it looks like a pretty typical apprenticeship program. It's a 3-day-a-week at work, 2-day-a-week at school model. It's 2 years where students go through 5 straight semesters. They complete the program and earn an associate degree. They complete about 2,000 hours worth of on-the-job training. And then they're typically hired by the company that sponsored them. So it's at least at the global level, it looks like an apprenticeship program you would see anywhere. But when you dig into the details a little more, you begin to see some things that are unique to FAME. And when those things interact together, they really, I think, bring the success that Ron's going to show you about in just a minute. So first and foremost, FAME is an employer-led program. Nothing happens in FAME without employers running it. So that is key, and it really defines everything that happens. Secondly, there are three pillars that really make up the education aspect of it. One of them is technical training, right? So it's the fluid power, it's the mechanical systems, electricity, and that's pretty typical. But there are two others that are equally important. One of them is professional behaviors, everything from attendance and appearance to diligence and initiative, right? Really getting individuals to be professional in their approach. And the third one is what we call the manufacturing core exercises. This is really an opportunity to drill in the culture of manufacturing into those participants, using lean manufacturing as kind of the overlay, and really teaching critical thinking and problem solving approaches to how to address issues on the manufacturing floor. So the goal here is global best, entry-level, multi-skilled maintenance technicians. And we believe that FAME has gotten that, and that it's the results speak for themselves. So for those of you that are interested in learning more, at the conclusion of this, we actually have a FAME Live event scheduled for Wednesday. So I would encourage you to visit fame-usa.com and sign up for that, and come actually hear from panels of students and companies and partners about what makes FAME what it is. So Tamar, back to you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, and looking forward to hearing our group.
Thank you, Gardner. Just what we needed, the perfect introduction. So now I'd like to introduce my co-author, Ron Haskins. He's a senior fellow emeritus at the Brookings Institution, and he's going to tell you of stunning findings. Ron, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tamar. Let me begin by mentioning a few things that I want to be sure that everybody understands. The first one is that we are greatly indebted to both Toyota and to the Manufacturing Institute, as well as to the Kentucky technical staff, the state of Kentucky, for the technical college system. They kept the data and they analyzed some of the data for us, and they helped us with the matching that I'll talk about in just a minute. So without those three groups, we could not have done this study. Let me present what I think, and I have thought this since the very beginning of our study. The most important single piece of data is that 2/3 of the jobs in the United States now require some education or training beyond high school. And many students cannot go to a four-year college. They either can't afford it or they don't have the background. So we needed something between a simple high school degree and a four-year college degree. And that's the kind of thing that we're especially interested in. The community college system in the United States has turned out to be a lifesaver in this regard. There are also problems with four-year college. Four-year college would do a good job if all the students could do well there. But many of them cannot, and many of them are left with big debts. So again, a reason to have community colleges. FAME now has 400 partners in 13 different states. So they're a very large system. They've grown rapidly in the last 5 or 6 years. And then I think they made a very wise decision in September of 2019. They turned the program over to the Manufacturing Institute, and the Manufacturing Institute is now running the program. And the study that we're reporting here is one of the first large-scale studies that it has outcome data, that is data on employment and on earnings and on several other aspects of program performance. Let me spend just a minute on the methods of this study. The first thing to know is that we had access to records from the Kentucky Community and Technical College system on FAME graduates, and that again, we could not have done the study without that. They also made sure that we had data to the unemployment insurance system in the state, which provided us with data on earnings and employment by the people who participated in the program. Our strategy for determining whether the FAME program produced some outcomes on the group that we were interested in is to compare them with a very similar group that did not participate in FAME. They went to community colleges, but they were not in the FAME program. And those students were matched. We had help from the community and technical college system in doing this matching. We wanted to have full-time students entering college in the same year in both groups. We wanted to have access to employment and earnings data from the state UI agency, and we wanted to control for, there's a group of students that have to enroll in development courses because they either did not complete them in their high school degree or they had some issue. And then they all had to be from the same local workforce area. They were also matched on, they're all about approximately the same age. They had the same Pell Grant amount and the same academic year, either freshman or sophomore. So we have data for annual data for 2010 to 2011, that academic year, and then up through 2016 to 2017. We do have data for 2017 to 2018, but it was not completed at the time we started the study, so we did not analyze that. Now, here are three outcomes that we think are crucial and that will provide the audience with a good understanding of what the impact of the FAME program was. So first, let's look at the graduation rates. And here you can see each of the years, 2010, 11, 11, 12, and so forth. And the FAME is the gold bar graph, and non-FAME are the gray bar graphs. And you can see that for every year that we got data, FAME was more likely to graduate than non-FAME. And average across all the groups, FAME had something like an 80% graduation rate, and the non-FAME had a little bit less than a 30% graduation rate. So this is a very impressive outcome on the most fundamental outcome measure, which is completing the program. The next slide shows the differences in earnings between FAME and non-FAME graduates 1 year, 3 years, and 5 years after graduation. And again, this is very important data. It shows the differences in earnings. If the program had an impact, then you would expect to have these impacts on earnings. And indeed, there are very substantial impacts on earnings. And you can see that over the years of the program, the earnings differences increased. And for both groups, earnings increased. But the differences between the FAME and non-FAME group increased each year. In the 5th year, for example, the FAME group had almost $98,000 average income, whereas the non-FAME group had a much less than $53,000 in income. So third, we want to show that these impacts were not attributable only to whites or outcomes average across all the groups. So this chart compares FAME and non-FAME on white and other. Other includes blacks, Indians, and Asians, and averages across all those groups. And here you can see that to take the top two, FAME, we see that white 81% completed the program, and then down to the next set of outcomes for non-FAME, stay at the top. So the other group had 64% completion as compared with 81% for FAME. So these results show that the impacts of FAME also applied to the group most difficult to have big impacts on, and that is non-whites. And the impacts are still very impressive. So these results show that the FAME program not only is successful with whites, but with other racial groups as well, and that the impacts apply both to completion rates, and not shown here, but they also apply to earnings. So altogether, this is an impressive set of findings, and they show that the value of the FAME program applies across many groups. So, Tamar, back to you.
Thank you, Ron. Great work. Amazing results. So now I'm going to take off my MC moderator's hat and put on my co-author's hat. And forgive me if that's confusing, but I want to put the findings that Ron just explained to you in some context. I want to talk briefly about why Earn and Learn training is so important today. Ron touched on it a little bit, but I want to go into that a bit more. I want to talk about what makes it work, what accounts for those amazing results we just saw. And third, last, I want to talk a little bit about policy. How can policymakers scale programs like FAME? So why is apprenticeship so important? Why do we need it? One way to start to understand that is to think about manufacturing. The idea is bigger than manufacturing, but let's start with that concrete example. 100 years ago, heck, 50 years ago, you needed virtually no skills to work in manufacturing. Factory workers, very few factory workers had technical skills. The widget came by you on the assembly line, you tweaked it or turned it or connected it to something else, same tweak over and over again, very little skill. And old style manufacturing also required almost no communication skills. It's no accident that millions of immigrants got their start in manufacturing, people who couldn't even speak English. The job didn't require communications or teamwork. Well, those days are gone, believe me. Manufacturing is no longer a dirty, dark, dangerous job. It requires technical skills, communication skills, critical thinking, and problem solving. And it used to be that the boss did the problem solving in most businesses. Everybody else more or less did what the boss told him to do. That's not true anymore either, not in manufacturing or other jobs. And all of this traces back, to what we used to call the future of work isn't really the future. It's actually been with us for 3, 4, 5 decades that's transforming the workplace with automation, digitization, robotics, AI, you know the list. But the point is that this transformation, the meaning of this transformation, the result of this transformation is that everybody needs more education and training. People who used to get by with a bachelor's degree now need a master's. People who used to get by with a PhD now need postdoc. And most important, the people we're looking at today, people who used to get by with high school now need some kind of education and training beyond high school, some kind of post-secondary education and training. Maybe college, but also maybe something else, maybe something like apprenticeship. So that's the why. That's why this is important. Now let's talk about what and how. What is it that makes Earn and Learn training so effective? And I'm going to talk about FAME, what's special about FAME, but also about the broader notion of apprenticeship. And you don't have to, because I want to come back to our research, because you don't need to take my word for this. We have a far better source. We have a group of some 230 manufacturing technicians who had completed the FAME program. Who'd completed the FAME program. I'm having a little technology trouble. The second arm of our study sent them a survey and asked them what makes FAME work. What's the secret sauce? And their answers tell us a lot about FAME, but also about apprenticeship more broadly. So the first thing to know is that 97% of them agreed somewhat or agreed strongly that enrolling in FAME had been the right decision for them. Pretty good score, if you ask me. I don't think my college would come out that well. I don't know about yours. But then we asked them why they thought FAME was so effective. And here's what they said. There's a slide. It's the main components of the program. I don't see our slide. There are many components of the program. There we go. So there, if you look at the slide, it's a little bit, the writing is a little hard to see, but what's at the top is the on-the-job part. What's at the second bar is the combination of classroom learning and on-the-job training. And then there's a lot of other elements they also think are important. This is in the report, but the on-the-job and the combination of classroom and on-the-job is what really struck them all. And there's a lot to talk about here, but what's most interesting to me were their explanations of why that combination works so well, the classroom and the on-the-job. And on the next slide, we can see a window of that, window on that. Next slide, next slide. So when we analyzed the survey, we were able to separate the answers of people who'd been great students in high school versus middling students, people who always knew they'd go to college versus people who never thought they would. And this was interesting and useful because good students probably would have succeeded in any program. So, what's important to them matters, but maybe not as much as what made a difference for middling students. Middling students give us a window on what really works in FAME, or, I would say any education and training program. And look at their answers. The dark orange lines are students who rarely paid attention in class, rarely understood why they were sitting in class before FAME, didn't know how to enter into schoolwork, this is before FAME, or get anything useful out of it. But the on-the-job experience taught them why and how, helped them figure out what questions to ask in class, gave them a chance to apply what they learned in class in a hands-on setting as a way to learn and remember it. And there's a lot more to say about that, about the combination, and also what's unique about FAME, including, and Gardner mentioned this briefly, the way it combines technical training with soft skills, teaching students both a strong work ethic, but also higher order soft skills like critical thinking and problem solving. But I have only 1 minute left, and so I want to talk briefly about policy. Because obviously we as a nation need to scale this, right? Some years triple the graduation rate, some years double the salaries, a 97% approval rating. Whatever the secret sauce is, we want more of it. We need to grow the FAME program, we need to scale apprenticeship, and shorter, less intensive training programs can also learn from FAME, adapting the principle of on-the-job training combined with classroom, adapting that focus on both technical and soft skills. So how do we scale apprenticeship? Well, one of the main challenges in scaling any training is engaging employers, getting more employers involved in stepping up to sponsor programs or work with educators to sponsor programs. And the challenge for government is to create incentives for employers. And we recommend a few steps in the report. I'll run through them very briefly. First is government should provide more funding for the classroom portion of the Earn and Learn experience. This is what they do in Europe, in Germany, in Switzerland. Earn and Learn training is expensive. The employer has to pay the wages and the cost of a mentor. It's an investment that pays off, but skilled workers are also a public good, just like college graduates. And there's an argument for the government shouldering more of the cost. They could make it easier for employers if they split the cost. If the government paid the classroom part in high school, community college, wherever, and the employer paid for the costs associated with the on-the-job training. Number two, our second recommendation is that government should leverage the reach of trade associations to recruit employers to sponsor groups. Gardner talked about this just a little bit, but one of the main reasons that FAME works is that employers recruit and persuade other employers to participate. That's how employers think. They trust other employers. And trade associations are, big groups of employers. They're a huge underused asset in the national push to expand apprenticeship. Number three, the government should experiment with tax incentives to encourage employers. I'm not 100% sure that tax incentives will make much difference, but it certainly merits experimentation on a broader scale. Number four, I think the government should help fund third-party intermediaries to provide technical assistance to employers. Creating an apprenticeship isn't easy. Employers need help, and third-party intermediaries are just the kind of group that can do it. Our last recommendation, and this is a little more controversial, but the fact is many employers, and we saw this in the FAME program, don't like government bureaucracy. They don't want to have to register their apprenticeship programs. And if we really want to scale Earn and Learn training nationwide, I think we should look for ways to recognize and incentivize and create quality control mechanisms for unregistered Earn and Learn programs as well as registered apprenticeship. So I'll stop there. I'll switch back to my MC hat and introduce the next session. So we're going to move to a discussion now, a panel of people who had nothing to do with the paper, but are in a position to comment on it. Some of them because they know how FAME works, its strengths and its challenges, and others who have a broader view of apprenticeship who can also talk about strengths and challenges. Edward Alden, is a senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. He'll be your moderator. Take it away, Ted.
Thanks. Thanks, and thank Opportunity America for the chance to be involved with this important event, and to you and to Ron for a superb study. There are many of us who've seen anecdotally the importance of these employer-led earn and learn programs, and there's some excellent research out there. We highlighted some of it in the Council Task Force I participated in 2018 that was co-chaired by Penny Pritzker and former Michigan Governor John Engler. Findings that the potential gain from well-run programs of the sort that FAME has put together can produce enormous improvements in job placement, earnings, future opportunities for the individuals involved, much better than the results for a comparable cohort attending regular community college programs. We have a tremendous panel here to discuss in more detail the FAME program and whether some of what is being learned on the ground here can be scaled up and embraced by the watching. If you have questions or for that, please Q&A box on Zoom and we will try to get as possible. Let me do quick introductions here of our panelists. James Atkinson is Senior Technical Manufacturing Trainer at GE Appliances in Louisville, a major employer working with the Kentucky FAME program students. Robert Lehrman is an Institute Fellow at the Urban Institute and one of the first scholars to argue for a youth apprenticeship strategy in the United States. James McCaslin is the Provost at South Central Kentucky Community and Technical College, which among many other accomplishments is a partner in the Kentucky FAME program. And then Audrey Webb is an engineer and project director for the Alabama Community College system, where she is working on the implementation of FAME in Alabama. So let me start with Dr. McCaslin, or Dr. J as he is widely known, my favorite basketball player when I was in high school, for what it's worth. Give us a brief, and I mean brief, you're going to set a model for the panel here, a brief overview of how the FAME program works and the role played by community colleges like yours.
Thanks very much, Ted, and thanks to Tamar for inviting me to the panel. My name is James McCaslin. Everybody calls me Dr. J, and my personal safety commitment is to not walk with my hands in my pockets. Gardner has already mentioned that personal safety commitments are very important in the FAME program. It's one of the manufacturing core exercises that we instill. Safety is the number one thing that we instill from the time that these students are brought in. Gardner's already touched on the fact that the FAME program is one where students who are selected for the program come to school 2 days per week, and they learn all of the theory and a lot of the practical in their lab. But the next day, the other 3 days a week, they're implementing those things and learning more about how their industry sponsor does that on the ground there. Why are community colleges interested in this kind of program? You saw some of the data that Ron provided. So as a community college administrator, if I've got a regular student who's got a 30% chance of graduating, or a FAME student that's got an 81% chance of graduating, and when they graduate, they're going to make $60,000 off the bat. That's something that we want to be part of. The students that graduate from our program also graduate debt-free. So if you're a community college administrator and you're worried about loan default rates, there's no better sales point than debt-free. I think the really important piece for those of my colleagues in the higher education world that may be watching this is FAME is different. When we say that a Kentucky FAME program or FAME USA is an employer-led initiative, we mean it. The employers select the students that go through this program. The employers provide monthly feedback on how we're delivering the courses. And a good example of that is we've been using ABB, programmable logic controllers, in our classroom. And a couple of years ago, the employers came in for that monthly meeting and they said, ABB is great, but we also need them to learn Siemens. And so we find a way to make that happen. So it is a highly selective program. The employers choose how they're going to choose the student through, and then they tell us how many students will be teaching in each cohort. And for us locally, and a lot of the programs that are so successful, it really all comes together with a success coach. So a person, usually employed by the college, who is the primary liaison between the student, the instructor, and the employers. They're the facilitator, only facilitating what the employers are laying out for us.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Dr. J. And your comments on employer-led actually lead me quite naturally to the next question. James Atkinson, I'd like to ask you the same question from an employer perspective. What's in it for a company like GE Appliances to put in the time and the effort and the personnel that it takes to be involved in a program like FAME? What's in it for you?
Yeah, thanks, Ted. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't start with my personal safety commitment, which is to wear the proper PPE before whatever task is being performed at hand. For the employer's perspective, and specifically with GE Appliances, ever since the start of FAME, since they branched out from Georgetown, Kentucky with Toyota, GE Appliances was at the forefront of bringing that into Greater Louisville with our Greater Louisville chapter of KY FAME. And really, we looked at what is it that we need to do to help bridge that skills gap that we've had with our employees. And you've heard Tamar talk about that earlier, about the type of education and training that we need for those employees. And FAME was just a perfect fit. And being able to work with our community college system for Kentucky, it's KCTCS, and locally JCTC out of that arm. But they have been great partners in helping us build this model and deliver it over the years to help fill these holes, to help fill the skills gap. And I guess just from the employer side of that, looking at the board and the makeup of the employer board, it's not just maybe a larger employer like GE Appliances, but we have many smaller employers, but they have an equal voice on the board. And as referred to earlier, this is an employer-driven board. So this is something that we all have a hand in. And actually, some of the maybe smaller employers that may not be a household name, they actually may take more apprentices over the year than maybe some of the others. So this is just an opportunity for employers of all sizes to be involved. And out of that, we get a well-educated general maintenance technician. And, you know, of course, in business, we like to see where the data is, and numbers don't lie. So we look at the study and we look at those numbers that came out, and it shows that those FAME students that graduate, you know, they are the ones that are completing at the top program, and they have the higher earning potentials, but they have that persistence to graduation as well. And from that, as an employer's standpoint, it's what's your return on investment? So the return on investment for us is investing in the individual and investing in the program and making sure that they see themselves through the graduation.
Yeah, so effort at the front end, but you're getting high quality people who are then an enormous asset to the company and for in their location decisions. Employees is usually at the top of that list. I want to move on to Audrey. You're deeply involved in the expansion of the FAME program in Alabama. So you are scaling up a program in the state of Alabama. What's involved in that? And in particular, how do you get in from employers? How do you persuade them to make this upfront effort in getting involved in the program and working with the community colleges?
So my name's Audrey Webb, and I'm the project director of ALAMAP. We're scaling FAME in Alabama. And my personal safety commitment is to always wear my safety glasses when in the lab and on the manufacturing floor. So James, Dr. J, Gardner, they all have touched on the most important aspect of that, and that is an industry buy-in, industry-led program. So as to scale these FAME programs in Alabama, the most important thing first is to have the industry partners in that area or in that region. Once we have the industry partners, then we also work real closely with our workforces and our chambers, local chambers, to help us. If we don't have the industry partnership necessarily, maybe they can help us bring in those other industry partners that we need. Once we do that, then we work really closely with the industry partners for them to pick the community college that they want to have for their related technical instruction. When we do that, then we work really closely with those partners to see what they want in an AMT workforce group. And as James said at GE, it doesn't have to be the biggest partner. We have some colleges that have the big automotive industries with Honda and Toyota and Mazda Toyota, but we also have a college where they don't have the big automotive sector there. So it doesn't really have to be one huge company. It works better with a consortium of companies. So once we establish that, then we have to look at see what equipment the college has. Someone Tamar mentioned earlier, it's an expensive program to get started. So how do we get that equipment that we need to teach in our community colleges? One of the things we did is we applied for a Well grant that we're working with MI and NAM on to expand those stations and to be able to get the equipment needed. But the easiest part was the employer buy-in. So some of the things that we did at one of the colleges at Gadsden State that we started a FAME program is we worked with our local workforce program. We also worked with one of the big OEMs, Honda. We took some of our industries that was interested in FAME up to Calhoun Community College, which was the first FAME program in Alabama, to look at the program and look at the AMTs. And to be honest, how it was won over by the employers was the AMT students. Once the employers look at that AMT student and see the professional behaviors, see how they're dressed, see how they act, see what they know, it's just a no-brainer. They want those students immediately for themselves. So that's kind of how we started off. And right now we have 5 FAME programs. We have 1 in the process, and we're looking at 2 more.
Excellent, thank you. Just a quick follow. Are some of the employers you're dealing with really novices at this? They've never hired apprentices before, and this is a brand new kind of idea for them, or have some tried in the past? And are the ones who've done it and just not had good experience, any not thought about going down this this route before?
Well, we've had a little mixture in Alabama. In fact, in the last year, we have started our own Alabama Office of Apprenticeship, SRE, to do apprenticeships. But also we've had work-based learning in the past, but not to this extent and to this program. This program is very special. I'm an engineer, and I used to teach at the community college level also. I worked in industry also. So I had really good relationships with some of the manufacturers that now have a FAME program. And we tried to do things, but as soon as we could develop FAME, they jumped on board and went to that model, just because it's so different and it adds so much more than just the basic work-based learning programs.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. I want to turn now to Dr. Lerman and ask you some of the same question I was asking Audrey about scalability, but with a bit more of a policy lens. Tamar talked about this a little bit, but are there things that government should be doing that they're not doing? What are the ways in which you scale up programs like this and take advantage of this success to reach more of the students who would benefit from it, more of the employers who would benefit from it?
Well, thanks, and thanks to Tamar and Ron for this excellent study. And my safety commitment is to obey my wife, who doesn't let me out of the house too often except for a walk in the park. So the U.S. apprenticeship, just to put it in a little bit of perspective, we probably get about 4 to 5% of a cohort, of an age cohort, into an apprenticeship program, which is really a serious effort to gain high levels of occupational competency that leads to good careers. And this is far below what other countries, most other countries, do, and especially the countries with robust systems. We've long had a very large segment of our systems in construction, industrial and commercial construction. Actually, going back into the late 40s, we did have a bigger manufacturing component, but then it sort of withered down. And outside of manufacturing and construction, we haven't had real large efforts. That's beginning to change. We're now putting some federal dollars into the effort. Tamar reports about $1 billion was spent over the last 4 or 5 years. That's in comparison to about $30 million that we were spending for the Office of Apprenticeship. So I think there are a couple of key points. Tamar highlighted a lot of the ones I would mention, namely funding the off-job learning, encouraging intermediaries to providing incentives for intermediaries to help scale the program. I would add developing some occupational competency standards that everyone would know about and making it easier to become an official, especially if it's a registered apprenticeship program. We now have a bit of a confusion here between registered and unregistered. And then most, I think, is to make apprenticeship something that people will aspire to rather than resort to. Raising the prestige of apprenticeship and the idea that apprenticeship really, and this is the truth, so we don't have to go too far, we just need to make it available to everyone, that apprenticeship yields a very high level of occupational skills, employability skills, and really helps people learn how to learn. And is not a dead end at all. It provides that kind of effort. And it also is engaging for young people, because for incumbent work, because instead of sitting in a classroom the whole time, you're actually producing something, learning on the job, working with mentors, and it really is very attractive if we can move it forward. But the key is really to scale with employers. And once we have employers offering quality apprenticeships, I think young workers and other workers will come.
Thank you very much, Bob. I mean, very much on that line of, how do you persuade young people that this is a good path? And I apologize, it sounds like my connection's a little choppy, so I hope everybody's hearing me well. But I want to ask James Atkinson, is it enough for employers to be working with the community colleges? Do you need to be reaching right down into the high schools, or maybe even earlier, to make young people aware of some of the opportunities that can come through programs like this?
Absolutely. As we know, students don't always know what they don't know, right? So we absolutely have to work with those high schools, because our partnerships with the community colleges have been phenomenal. But when we look at trying to reach out to all these schools, it's a very grassroots effort through the famed board of employers as well as the community colleges. So luckily for us, we have Debbie Anderson at JCTC, who does a great job of partnering with our high schools. But really, it's incumbent upon us as the employer board, and we just kind of divide and conquer as our relationships with some of the local schools may be organic because we have a son or daughter there, or it's our alma mater, or whatever it might be. But we still have to be very specific and strategic about reaching out to those schools. So we have to go in there and let them know what this program is all about. And of course, I think the best breeder of success is success itself. So as we have one or two of their graduates through the program, and they can physically see, oh, they went straight into school and they were employed, and this is what they're doing, and they're doing this fun stuff that some of these other students might want to know. And that's really big win for us, is when we see someone from that school go through and successful, and that just helps get the word out to those students.
Yeah, it's definitely the best recruiting tool. People follow their peers if they see successful paths. I actually wanted to sort of go from young people more to mid-career people. There's a lot of talk about the importance of lifelong learning, and I was struck in the report about how many of the famed students are older. The Wall Street Journal story actually highlighted an older student. Dr. J, I wanted to ask you, what has your experience been with older students in the program?
That's an excellent question, and we've been very fortunate. We've now enrolled 5 different cohorts of FAME at our local chapter, which is Sky Fame. And from the very beginning, we've always had about a 50-50 mix between students fresh out of high school and incumbent employees. The wonderful thing about incumbent employees is they've got a world experience. So they're not all also they're helping those that are younger than them, but they're also serving as mentors for those students, not just in how to do a certain thing, but in how to behave, how to communicate with one another. In our 5 years, we've actually had 2 sets of a father and son being in the same cohort and graduating together. It's just one of those things you don't plan, but on the end, it's a wonderful thing to actually see happen.
And what's the attractiveness for a mid-career person? How do they get drawn into a program like this? Because there must be some. There's certainly, I would think, when you're 35 or 40 or 45, going back to school like this. This has been a problem with lifelong learning programs everywhere. How are you successfully reaching out to those students?
I think the point to it, though, is they are building upon skills that they already have at their current employer. They want to do more. The employer sees something in them and wants to make that investment in them, and so they're paying their full salary and they're doing all the tuition assistance that they can with them. But they want to continue to grow. And Ron's data showed it. 5 years outside of the program, we're not talking about a $60,000 a year job. We're jumping to $90,000. So there's both intrinsic and extrinsic motivations for pursuing that type.
Yeah, it's a good point. One of the things we emphasized in the CFR report was those kinds of outcome data ought to be published everywhere for students to see, for parents to see, and mid-career workers to see. There's a question that's come through asking about how FAME tries to make it easier for companies to begin their own apprenticeships, to become involved in the program. Audrey, I think I'll ask you that. How does the FAME program try to help companies who say this is something that I would like to do?
So, well, a couple of different things. If a company sees that they need these AMT students, that maybe they're going to have a big changeover in retirement, or a new company comes in, like the new Toyota Mazda plant here in Alabama that's about to start up, and all of a sudden they want to be in a FAME program, and let's say that FAME chapter has already started. That FAME program, or that come to that FAME chapter and just say, hey, I would like to be part of this program. The chapter would look at the company and make sure that they are a company that needs to be in the FAME program. We'll make sure that it's a safe company, make sure that it's not one of those dark, dangerous type companies, which most of them are by the wayside now anyway, but just to make sure that they could be part of the advanced manufacturing, and then see how many students that they will need, and just to add them. Now they may have to wait till the next fall to start, if a company comes now, or there's a possibility that they could even start now. There are some FAME programs that have students that are waiting to be sponsored for whatever reason, especially in this new COVID. Dr. Jay's raising his hand, especially in this new COVID situation we have. A lot of students maybe lost their position, or the company wasn't able to hire one like they thought. So there are many ways for a company to join. So, and even smaller companies, it makes it easier for them also.
Tamar, I might actually. Sorry, go ahead, Dr. J. Please go ahead.
I was just going to say what Audrey's talking about. A few years ago, we started taking alternates. So we always have more students that apply for FAME than we have sponsorship slots. And so a few years ago, we started taking anywhere from 2 to 5 alternates. That way, if a company did hear about FAME and wanted to jump in kind of mid-semester, we would still have students that were already completed and ready to go for them. And to this point, most of the time, our alternates get snatched up even before the first semester of instruction begins.
Tamar, I was just going to ask you, how many states currently have a FAME program right now? And if you're a governor who's on the call, or you're working for a governor, you're like, I want to get this in my state. Is there a plan for expansion, or how do you get involved in this if you want to roll it out in other places?
I believe there are 13, and I think this is what the National Association of Manufacturers, this is what came into the game, because they want to spread it to all 50 states. And I think, you do need a little collective of employers. It can't be one employer, but I'm sure if you're a manufacturing employer in any state, I suggest you call the Manufacturing Institute, or you call your association of manufacturers in your state and you say, I want to start a FAME chapter. I'm guessing that they'll rush to help you. This is what we mean when we talk about intermediaries. Some companies just try to start apprenticeship on their own. That's doable, but it's hard. The good thing here is there's somebody who knows how to do it and knows the system to help you. And FAME comes with a lot of a toolkit, for want of a better word. You get the curriculum, and you get the methods, and you get the instruction, and it's a little bit like a franchise. And so if you could, call the Manufacturing Institute, I'm sure they'd hear from you.
Bob, you mentioned this in your opening comments, this notion that I think is kind of out there in the water, that all parents want their kids to go to 4 years, and it's hard to persuade them of the benefits of this type of program. Certainly, the data from Tamar's interviews in the report suggests that's not true. What have you found in your research?
Yeah, I was struck also, and put in a number here. She had something like 85% of for those in the top third of their class, 85% of parents or spouses were highly supportive of them going into apprenticeship. That's an amazing number, and I think it puts the lie to a myth, in my opinion, that we have to put a huge amount of effort into persuading people to let their young people go into apprenticeships. In fact, the bigger problem is having enough apprenticeships, so that when an advisor or somebody at the high school who's advising them, and normally those advisors know a lot about colleges, but not much about the labor force and the labor market. We put a full bore effort to them to advise everybody to go into apprenticeships if we don't have the apprenticeships. It'll just create a long waiting list. So I think the big problem is, again, persuading companies, and there's a lot of ways of doing it. I just want to add one other point, and that has to do with manufacturing in the United States. If you look at Germany and Switzerland, where apprenticeship is so widespread, they've also had the least losses of manufacturing jobs everywhere. Manufacturing goes down because of automation. But those places, because they've had the kind of skill that becomes embedded in apprenticeship, have not lost nearly as many manufacturing positions as we have. So it is very encouraging that the Manufacturing Institute is recognizing this, is promoting this approach to both enhance skills, enhance earnings, enhance productivity in the manufacturing sector. And I think that bodes well for the future.
Thank you very much, and it actually kind of leads naturally to the final question I had for anybody who wants to weigh in on this in the terms of a closing comment. I mean, I'm out here in Washington State, and Susie Levine, who was President Obama's ambassador to Switzerland,
Yeah.
came back persuaded of the virtues of the Swiss model, and certainly persuaded me in a lot of ways. But I guess what we seem to be talking about here is maybe some kind of American model is developing here. Does anyone on the call want to talk about that? Is there the makings here of some kind of American model of earn and learn and apprenticeship that people might start talking about around the world rather than just talking about the Swiss model and the German model?
Yeah, I'll weigh in on that. I'm sure
Well,
others may want to as well. But I mean, one of the things is that it's so employer driven. In Germany and Switzerland, the government has a lot to do with generating the program. Chambers are involved, labor unions are involved, but it's not employers coming together and saying, we want to do this and here's how we want it to work. And so I think that might be a unique American angle on it. And I think all apprenticeship programs think about this soft skill, employability skill, problem solving, creativity aspect, but FAME does that so intensively and so intentionally. I think that might be another aspect of what we might, I mean, from your lips to God's ears, right? The American apprenticeship model. I think FAME would be a great place to start.
Others
And
want to weigh in on that.
I'm
Go ahead, Audrey, please. We'll do Audrey, and then we'll do Bob. Go ahead, Audrey.
I would just like to say too that a lot of times you think of apprenticeships, you think of the big company, GE, Honda, Toyota, those type companies. But with the FAME program, we can also support the smaller companies. We can support a company that just needs one apprenticeship, even one every other year. So with the consortium and with the big guys like GE, we can help the smaller companies also have a where normally they may not have been able to do that. And I think that's real important.
Yeah, absolutely. Bob, you had a comment as well.
Yeah, I would disagree that we've really gone all that far in the American system.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of great bottom-up efforts. FAME is one. The federal support for states and for intermediaries is another. These are bottom-up efforts that are great. They enhance the constituent apprenticeship. They make more and more people aware of it. But we do have a systemic approach that, as Tamar mentioned herself, would involve funding for off-job learning of apprenticeships. That would involve funding for intermediaries to help stimulate apprenticeships. That would involve skill standards. I would take a bit of issue with Tamar about the employer-led angle. These other countries have very, very strong employer engagement in groups and in individual cases. And we've seen, actually, I would look at, to some extent, at the UK. They have a much more robust effort to revise skill frameworks on a frequent basis. Their industry structure looks a bit more like our own. They have more of a free market approach to things, and they've managed apprenticeship. So I think we have a ways to go, but we're well on our way, and I appreciate all the efforts of FAME and the other parties to move this forward.
I mean, I think, one very clear takeaway from all of this is that there is an awful lot of demand is out there, and if we can find ways to supply that demand through the community colleges and other institutions, I think the sky's the limit on this. I want to thank our panelists and the organizers. Encourage everyone to read the report. It's I've read a lot of reports over the years in DC. This one is both compelling and brief. You get to the point, and you make it clearly, and you learn a lot for not a lot of time. So thank you to Tamar and to Ron for that. Also, for employers and others who are interested, I was asked to point out the FAME website. It's fame-usa.com, and you can learn more about the program. And Tamar, I will turn it back to you for some closing comments. Thanks again to all of our panelists. This was a superb discussion. I'm delighted to be part of it.
Thank you so much, Ted. Great discussion. Thank you, Ted. Thanks, panel. What I took away from that is some of us in DC, we sit around scratching our head thinking, how do we engage employers? And it was really Audrey's comment that, when you have a good product, when you have a training program that works and you show employers, they want it. And, so if the challenge is scaling this, is getting employers engaged, that's a very encouraging note, that if we can just show them something good, more of them are going to sign up. Before we close, I just want to say a couple more quick thanks. One, first to our funder, the Annie E. Casey Foundation. There'd be no report without the Annie E. Casey Foundation. And I also want to thank all the people in Kentucky who made our research possible. The Kentucky Center for Statistics did all of that data analysis. The Kentucky Community and Technical College System was incredibly welcoming and helpful at every turn. 2 or 3 dozen FAME program administrators helped us set up focus groups and administer the survey. And most meaningful to me were the 275 or so FAME graduates who actually participated in the survey and the focus groups and gave us their opinion about what works about this amazing program. So you can find the report at opportunityamericaonline.org, /KYFAME/. Thanks very much for tuning in. Hold on, I think everybody might be here. Are you all still here? Am I looking at real people in real time?
I think most of us are here. We were scared to log off.
Thank you, everyone. I thought that went well. The audio is kind of choppy. I don't know what to do about that. But you guys were all smart and interesting, and so let's hope that people listened up to the choppy audio. Bob, this conversation would be complete without Bob disagreeing with me. So we achieved our aim for the day. Just thank you. Any more thoughts from you guys?
No, thank you
No,
very much.
I just, Audrey, I want to get in touch with you about our youth apprenticeship efforts with high schools, where we're sort of covering a broader spectrum of occupations to create registered apprenticeships.
She works at the community
She's still
college.
there?
She works at the community
Huh?
college. She works at the
That's
community
okay.
college. Okay. Okay. Well, you know where we live. If we can help you or do anything, more around any of this, please be in touch.
Okay. Thanks, Tamar.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Have a great day.
Bye.